I still remember the sledgehammer frozen in midair. My brother Jake stood there, his face twisted with rage, and something else I had never seen before. Satisfaction. Behind him, my sister Brooke was filming everything, her phone steady despite her laughter. The sight of my $156,000 studio in pieces hit me like a physical blow. Equipment I had saved years for lay in ruins. When I screamed for them to stop, Jake turned. The punch came so fast I barely saw it. As I hit the floor, my nose exploding with pain, Brooke stepped closer, camera aimed at my bloodied face. "This is going to get so many views," she whispered, zooming in. Music had always been my escape. Growing up in our small Wisconsin town, I spent hours in my bedroom with a second-hand guitar while other kids were at the mall. By 16, I was recording local bands on equipment bought from summer jobs. By 22, I had my first credit on a charting single. Now, at 32, after a decade of 16-hour days, sleeping on studio couches, and eating ramen to save every penny, I had finally built my dream. A professional-grade home studio that rivaled anything in Milwaukee or Chicago. The basement of my modest suburban home had been transformed into a sanctuary of sound, custom acoustic treatment, vintage analog gear, alongside cutting-edge digital interfaces, and a collection of rare instruments that artists would travel hundreds of miles to use. Every inch of that space represented sacrifice. I had taken a second mortgage, gone without vacations for 5 years straight, and worked myself to exhaustion, building both the physical space and my reputation as Teresa Hartman, the producer who could make anyone sound like their best self. My parents never understood my dedication. Their praise was always reserved for Jake, despite his string of abandoned careers and sure-thing business ideas that inevitably failed. Even when I flew them to the Grammy Awards when one of my productions was nominated, they spent the evening talking about how Jake was this close to getting signed by a label for his metal band, Toxic Inheritance. Brooke was different. 3 years younger than Jake, she had always been the baby of the family. Pretty and popular in high school, she expected the same easy path afterward. When reality didn't deliver, she turned to social media, desperately chasing followers with increasingly outrageous prank videos. Her channel, Brooke Breaks Boundaries, had a brief spike of popularity 2 years ago, but had been steadily losing subscribers as newer, younger creators emerged. I should have seen the warning signs. 3 months ago, Jake asked to borrow some basic recording equipment just to demo some songs. I was happy to help, thinking maybe he was finally getting serious about music. When I stopped by his apartment to drop off a microphone and interface, I noticed how intently he studied my car, asking when I would be back to pick it up. "I have sessions all week," I explained. "I probably won't need it back until next Sunday." 2 weeks later, I noticed my backup hard drive was missing. When I texted Jake and Brooke about it, they both denied seeing it. The next day, it reappeared in my hallway closet, a place I had already checked twice. Then came the odd calls from Jake, asking about my schedule in detail. "Are you recording that drummer guy on Thursday? How long will that take? Does he usually stay late?" At the time, I thought he was just showing interest in my work for once. The final warning came just 3 days before the destruction. I returned from a coffee run during a session to find Brooke in my kitchen. She claimed she was just dropping off Mom's casserole dish, but seemed startled when I appeared. That evening, I noticed tiny things out of place in the studio. A microphone stand moved, my chair at a different height, the settings changed on my main console. I dismissed all these red flags because I was focused on the opportunity of a lifetime. Mariah Carter, a multi-platinum artist whose work I had admired for years, was scheduled to record vocals for her upcoming album in my studio the following week. Her producer had heard a folk album I engineered and wanted that warm, intimate sound for Mariah's more acoustic-leaning new project. This single session could catapult my career to an entirely new level. The day of the attack, I was supposed to be at a string recording session across town until at least 8 at night. The session ended early when the violinist got food poisoning. I drove home around 4, pulling into my driveway just as a van I didn't recognize was parking across the street. I thought nothing of it, happy to have unexpected free hours to prepare for Mariah's session. The sounds hit me first. Crashing, breaking glass, male voices shouting, and unmistakable laughter. I ran down the stairs to find 3 men with sledgehammers destroying everything in sight. Jake stood in the center, bringing his hammer down on my vintage 1960s mixing console, an irreplaceable piece I had restored over 6 months. Brooke circled the destruction, phone out, directing the chaos. Smash those guitars next. Those are worth a ton. After Jake hit me, I crawled behind what remained of my drum isolation booth, blood pouring from my nose, head spinning from hitting the concrete floor. Through tears, I fumbled for my phone to call 911. The screen was cracked from my fall, but it still worked. As I waited for the police, I noticed a text notification from Jake to me that I hadn't opened. Sorry, T, but we're taking what should have been mine all along. You got all the talent in the family, all the success, while I got nothing. This is going to change everything. Brooke says this could get 20 million views. Should have shared the wealth while you had the chance. The timestamp showed he had sent it 30 minutes earlier, expecting me to see it after they had fled the scene. As I scrolled up in horror, I found weeks of messages between Jake and Brooke that I had somehow been included on but never noticed. Brooke. Tay's always recording on Thursdays. That engineer guy keeps her there until at least 8. Jake. Perfect. I'll get Ryan and Dave to help. They think it's for a music video. Brooke. Make sure you break everything. The more expensive looking, the better. And those signed guitars on the wall are like $10,000 each. Make sure to get those on camera. Jake. This is going to blow up bigger than anything. Jealous brother destroys sister's music studio is going to make us famous. I already have people asking about toxic inheritance after I teased this. I felt physically sick reading their calculated destruction of my life's work. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, or a prank gone wrong. They had planned for weeks to destroy everything I had built, all for views and attention. As the police sirens approached, I heard Brooke saying, "We've got enough. Let's get out of here before the neighbors call the cops." They fled, leaving me bleeding on the floor of what had once been my dream, now reduced to splinters, broken glass, and twisted metal. As the red and blue lights flashed through the basement windows, I realized my family had not just broken my studio, they had broken something inside me that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. The police officers who responded were surprisingly young. Officer Daniels couldn't have been more than 25, and his partner Officer Ryan looked barely old enough to drink. They walked through the destruction of my studio taking notes, occasionally exchanging glances that screamed domestic dispute. Despite the blood still crusting around my nostrils and the obvious destruction around us, their questions carried an unmistakable undercurrent of family matter. "So this is your brother and sister?" Officer Daniels confirmed, his pen hovering above his notepad. "And they had keys to your house?" Jake had emergency keys. Yes, but not permission to enter when I wasn't home. I explained for the 3rd time, my voice shaking with a mixture of pain and frustration. "Ma'am, we'll file the report, but since this involves family members with access to the property, it's going to be considered a civil matter. You'll want to pursue this in court," Officer Ryan added, not looking up from his form. My brother punched me in the face. I pointed to my swollen nose, and they destroyed over $150,000 worth of equipment. "How is that a civil matter?" Officer Daniels sighed. "We'll note the assault, but without witnesses besides the parties involved. Look, you should get medical attention and then contact a lawyer. Family disputes get complicated." They left me with a case number, a victim services pamphlet, and the distinct impression that they considered this little more than a sibling squabble gone too far. At the emergency room, the triage nurse winced when she saw my face. "Bar fight?" she asked, gently cleaning blood from my upper lip. "Family disagreement," I replied, too exhausted to explain. The diagnosis was a broken nose, a mild concussion from hitting the floor, and various cuts from falling onto broken equipment. The doctor set my nose with a crack that made my eyes water, then fitted me with a splint. "No heavy lifting for at least 2 weeks," he advised. "And watch for signs of concussion, dizziness, nausea, sensitivity to light." I called my parents from the hospital parking lot, expecting shock, outrage, some parental intervention. Instead, My mother's first question after hearing about the destruction was, "Did you say something to provoke Jake? You know how sensitive he is about his music." "Mom, they destroyed my studio. Everything. All my equipment. They filmed it for social media." I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. "Well," she paused. "They're just trying to build their careers too, honey. Brooke's been struggling with her channel and Jake's band needs exposure. I'm sure they didn't mean it to go this far. Jake broke my nose, Mom. He's always had a temper. Remember when you broke his Game Boy in 3rd grade?" I hung up, unable to process the false equivalence between a childhood accident and the calculated destruction of my livelihood as an adult. Back home, the full impact hit me. Every corner of the studio held another heartbreak. My customized acoustic panels, imported from Germany, had been torn from the walls and stomped on. The isolation booth where singers recorded vocals was now a skeleton of splintered wood and dangling insulation. My rack of outboard gear compressors, equalizers, effects units I'd collected for years had been pulled from their mounts and smashed. Most painful were the guitars. A 1970s Fender Stratocaster signed by Eric Clapton, a Martin acoustic used on 3 Grammy-winning albums, a custom Gibson that a grateful client had given me after our record went gold, all destroyed beyond repair. The Gibson's neck had been snapped completely, the body cracked down the middle. The destruction wasn't just physical. My schedule was full of sessions I now had to cancel. With each call, email, and text, I felt my professional reputation disintegrating. "I'm so sorry, but there's been an incident at my studio." "Yes, all the equipment." "No, I don't know when I'll be operational again." "Of course, I understand you need to find another engineer." By midnight, I'd lost 6 confirmed sessions and 3 tentative bookings. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder for Mariah Carter's session the following week. I sent a text to her producer, my hands shaking. "There's been a significant issue with the studio. I won't be able to accommodate next week's session. I apologize for the inconvenience." His response came almost immediately. "Not professional. Won't recommend." 4 words that summed up the death of an opportunity I had worked 10 years to create. As dawn broke, bleary-eyed from no sleep, and still in pain from my injuries, I found myself scrolling through social media. That's when I saw it. Jake's face filled my screen, eyes wild with excitement. "Destroying my famous sister's expensive music studio. Revenge prank gone crazy." The video already had 4 million views. In 12 hours. I watched in horror as Brooke's steady camera work captured every moment of the destruction, complete with Jake's running commentary. "This mixer right here? Worth more than most people's cars. Watch what happens when you don't support your brother's music career." The sledgehammer came down, and commenters responded with fire emojis and savage reactions. When they filmed me entering the studio, my shock and screaming had been edited to look like an over-the-top reaction. The moment Jake punched me was cut out entirely. Instead, the video jumped to a scene of me on the ground, with a voiceover from Jake. "She was so mad she tripped and fell. Shouldn't have hoarded all that expensive equipment." The comments section was filled with people laughing, asking for more, and most disturbingly industry names I recognized. "Wish someone would destroy Teresa Hartman's career. She's been overrated for years. Maybe now some real engineers will get those gigs instead. Toxic Inheritance's music is fire. About to blow up bigger than his sister ever did." By noon, the video had reached 12 million views. A social media analytics site estimated they were earning between $8,000 and $15,000 a day from monetization alone. My phone rang. It was my insurance company. "Miss Hartman, we've reviewed your claim for the studio destruction." The adjuster's voice was professionally detached. "Unfortunately, since this was an intentional act committed by a family member with access to your property, it falls under our policy exclusions. We won't be able to cover any of the damages." I sank to the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my life's work, while my siblings' popularity soared on the back of my destruction. Days melted together in a haze of pain medications, unanswered emails, and mounting bills. My concussion symptoms made it difficult to focus for more than 20 minutes at a time. Bright light sent spikes of pain through my skull, making computer work nearly impossible. The bruises around my eyes had faded from angry purple to sickly yellow-green, but the deeper wounds showed no signs of healing. Sleep became my enemy. Every night I jolted awake to phantom sounds of breaking glass and splintering wood. Sometimes I dreamed I was drowning in a sea of broken guitar strings that wrapped around my throat, pulling me down as Jake and Brooke waved from the shore, phones recording my struggle. After a week of self-isolation, my mother organized what she called a family healing gathering at my Aunt Susan's house. "Everyone wants to support you through this difficult time," she insisted, ignoring my protests. "We need to come together as a family." I arrived last, parking my car at the far end of the driveway to enable a quick escape. Through the living room window, I could see Jake and Brooke already inside, surrounded by relatives who seemed more festive than concerned. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The room quieted momentarily, then erupted in forced cheerfulness. "There she is? Teresa, honey, how are you feeling? Your face looks so much better than I expected." No one mentioned the studio. No one asked about my livelihood. Aunt Susan steered me toward the food table, pressing a plate into my hands. "Eat something. You look thin." I felt Jake watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable. Brooke sat on the couch, thumbs flying across her phone screen, pausing occasionally to show something to our cousin Megan, who laughed behind her hand. Uncle Paul cornered me by the vegetable tray. "So, I saw that video," he started, lowering his voice. "Pretty crazy stuff. But you know what? Jake's band is getting some serious attention now. Sometimes these things work out for the best, right?" I stared at him. "My entire career is in jeopardy. How exactly is this working out for the best?" He shrugged. "You've had your time in the spotlight. Maybe it's Jake and Brooke's turn. Family should share success, you know?" Similar sentiments echoed throughout the afternoon. Aunt Carol suggested I look at this as an opportunity to start fresh, maybe in a more stable career. Cousin Steve asked if Jake could put in a good word with some industry people for his son's rap aspirations now that Jake was blowing up online. The final straw came during dessert. My father stood, glass raised in a toast. "To new beginnings," he announced. "Jake and Brooke have some exciting news." Jake stepped forward, arm around Brooke's shoulders. "Thanks to our recent video success, Toxic Inheritance has been approached by several labels." He paused, milking the moment. "And Brooke's channel has gained over 200,000 new subscribers. We're finally making it happen." Applause filled the room. My mother wiped away tears of joy. I set down my untouched cake and walked out. No one followed. At home, a letter from my bank waited in the mailbox. My mortgage payment was overdue. With no income from canceled sessions and savings rapidly depleting on medical bills, I was approaching financial freefall. My phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. "Saw what happened to your studio. Karma's a bitch when you steal other people's songs and pass them off as your productions." I had never stolen anyone's work in my life. My reputation for integrity was as important to me as my technical skills. But the narrative was being rewritten in real time. Online forums were suddenly filled with vague accusations about my professional ethics, all from new accounts with minimal posting history. The next morning, an email from my accountant contained another shock. She had been reviewing my parents' tax returns as part of my financial portfolio and discovered they had taken out a home equity line of credit 3 months ago. $20,000 had been withdrawn and transferred to Jake's account for what was listed as career development expenses. They had financed the destruction of my studio. With shaking hands, I called my mother, demanding an explanation. "It was for his music video budget," she explained defensively. "We had no idea he would use it this way." "Did you know what they were planning? Did you know they would break into my house and destroy my studio?" Her hesitation before answering told me everything. "Not exactly," she finally said. "Jake mentioned wanting to film something controversial involving your studio. We thought maybe they'd just, I don't know, pretend to break a few things. For views. We didn't think it would go this far. But you knew they were planning something," I pressed. "And you gave them money to do it. You've always been so selfish with your success, Teresa. Would it have killed you to help your brother and sister? To share some of those connections you guard so jealously?" Maybe if you had, they wouldn't have felt so desperate. I hung up, a cold realization settling in my stomach. My own parents were justifying the destruction of my career. That evening, I received the email I had been dreading. Mariah Carter's manager. After seeing the recent viral video involving your studio and the subsequent industry discussion, we will be going in another direction for Mariah's project. Your family situation appears unstable and potentially detrimental to her image. We wish you the best in resolving these personal matters. The industry discussion he referenced was a wave of gossip, speculation, and thinly veiled satisfaction at my downfall. Colleagues I thought were friends shared the video with wild and insane comments, carefully not taking sides but driving more traffic to Jake and Brooke's content. I tried calling several industry friends, seeking advice or maybe just sympathy. Most calls went straight to voicemail. Those who answered seemed uncomfortable, conversations ending with vague promises to catch up soon. Desperate for any connection, I reached out to Brooke. Maybe if I could understand why, I could begin to process the betrayal. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. She arrived 20 minutes late, sunglasses perched on her perfectly styled hair, an oversized iced coffee in hand. She looked like she had just stepped out of a lifestyle influencer's Instagram post. "You look terrible," were her first words to me. I ignored the jab. "I need to understand why you did this, Brooke. We're family. I would have helped you if you needed." "Helped me?" She cut me off with a bitter laugh. "Like you helped Jake when that producer was interested in his band but changed his mind after talking to you? What are you talking about? I never." "Save it, Teresa. We know you've been blocking us at every turn. Your success was handed to you because you were in the right place at the right time. The rest of us have had to fight for every opportunity. I built that studio over 10 years of nonstop work. And now you know how it feels to lose everything." Her eyes were cold, calculating. "Your success was making us look bad. Mom and Dad were always comparing us to perfect Teresa with her fancy Grammy invitations and celebrity clients. Now we've evened the playing field." She stood to leave, then leaned in close. "You should see the comments on our follow-up video. People love watching your meltdown. The one where you're crying in your car thinking no one can see you? Already at 8 million views. I hadn't realized they were still filming me. The violation felt worse than the physical destruction. At home, I searched frantically until I found a tiny camera hidden in the smoke detector in my living room. They had been watching me, capturing my most vulnerable moments as I processed the trauma they had inflicted. My private pain had become content for their growing audience. The foreclosure notice arrived 30 days after the destruction. Without income, with savings depleted by medical bills and basic survival, I could no longer maintain my mortgage payments. The bank was unwilling to defer payments or restructure the loan given my uncertain income prospects. I had 30 more days to vacate the property that had once represented my greatest achievement. I rented a small storage unit for the few undamaged pieces of equipment and personal belongings. The rest broken beyond repair I photographed for documentation, then discarded. Each shattered piece felt like burying a part of myself. A small efficiency apartment above a laundromat became my new home. The constant rumble of industrial dryers and smell of fabric softener were a far cry from my carefully sound-treated studio. At night, I lay awake on a second-hand mattress, listening to the muffled arguments of neighbors through paper-thin walls, wondering how my life had collapsed so completely in just over a month. The physical symptoms of trauma remained. Startling at loud noises, panic attacks that left me gasping for air, nightmares that sent me scrambling for lights in the darkness. I tried to find work, sending out resumes to studios across 3 states, offering to assist, to engineer, to do anything music-related. The responses were few and uniformly discouraging. "We're fully staffed at this time. We'll keep your information on file." "Is this the Teresa from that viral video?" "Sorry, we don't need that kind of drama." My savings account dwindled to 3 digits. I took odd jobs, dog walking, grocery delivery, transcription work, anything to keep the lights on. Each day felt like moving through quicksand, every task requiring monumental effort against the weight of depression. 6 weeks after losing my studio, I stood in the cereal aisle of a discount grocery store, calculating whether I could afford both food and electricity that week. The fluorescent lights seemed suddenly too bright, the narrow aisle closing in around me. My heart raced, palms sweating as I struggled to breathe. The cereal boxes blurred, the floor tilted beneath me. "Ma'am? Are you okay? Ma'am?" I came to on the cold tile floor, a store employee and concerned shopper kneeling beside me. An ambulance was called despite my weak protests about the cost. The EMTs suspected a panic attack, compounded by malnutrition and dehydration. They transported me to the county hospital, where I waited for hours in a crowded emergency room, clutching my grocery money to pay the copay. The young doctor who finally saw me ordered blood work and a basic psychological evaluation. "When was the last time you ate a full meal?" he asked, reviewing my vitals. I couldn't remember. "And you're experiencing regular panic attacks? Nightmares? Hypervigilance?" He looked up from his clipboard, his expression softening. "These are classic trauma responses. I'm going to refer you to our community mental health services." I nodded, too exhausted to explain that I couldn't afford therapy, couldn't afford much of anything anymore. Back in the waiting room, paperwork completed, I waited for discharge instructions. The plastic chair beside me squeaked as someone sat down. "Long night, huh?" The woman looked about my age, professionally dressed, despite the late hour. A leather briefcase balanced on her knees. "Yeah," I managed, not feeling conversational. "I'm Allie," she offered, twisted my ankle running for the subway. "You'd think as a New Yorker I'd be better at that by now. Moved to Wisconsin 6 months ago, and still think everywhere should have 24-hour service." Despite myself, I smiled slightly. "Teresa," I replied. "And no, nothing runs all night here except maybe the occasional bar." "You work in music?" she asked, noticing the faded studio logo on my sweatshirt. I did. I was a producer and engineer. "No kidding? I'm an entertainment lawyer. Just opened a practice here after years of New York burnout. Mostly music clients, some film." We fell into surprisingly easy conversation about the industry, favorite albums, the differences between Midwest and coastal music scenes. For 20 minutes, I felt almost normal, discussing compression techniques and microphone placement with someone who appreciated the craftsmanship involved. "So what happened?" Allie finally asked. "Why did instead of do?" I hesitated, then gave her the abbreviated version of the studio destruction, leaving out that it was my siblings who had orchestrated it. Her expression changed, eyes widening. "Wait, you're that Teresa? Teresa Hartman? The studio sledgehammer video?" I flinched, preparing for either mockery or false sympathy. "Those absolute vultures?" she said instead, her voice tight with anger. "I saw that video before it was taken down from the main platforms. The way they edited it was deliberately misleading. And the follow-ups have been even worse. Taken down?" This was news to me. For glorification of property destruction, supposedly, though they've re-uploaded to other platforms. But that's not the point. Allie shifted to face me directly. "Have you pursued legal action?" That was breaking and entering, destruction of property, assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, not to mention the financial damages. "The police called it a family dispute," I said flatly. "And I can't afford a lawyer anyway." "Family?" Her eyebrows shot up. "That was your family who did this to you?" I nodded, suddenly fighting tears. Allie handed me her business card. "I know we just met, but I specialize in cases like this: intellectual property, reputation management, entertainment contracts. I'd like to help, if you'll let me." "I can't pay you," I reminded her. "Let's start with a consultation. No charge. From what little I've seen, you have a strong case for significant damages." She wrote her cell number on the back of the card. "Call me tomorrow. Or whenever you're ready." I tucked the card into my pocket, not fully believing anything would come of it, but feeling the first flicker of hope in weeks. That flicker nearly extinguished the next morning when I received a text from my former assistant engineer Sam. "Don't know if you've heard, but Jake just signed with Atlantic. $300K signing bonus, 5-album deal. They're marketing him as the rebel brother from that viral video. Thought you should know. Hope you're okay. Jake had achieved his dream record deal, the very thing I had worked for over a decade to attain directly because of destroying my career. The bitter irony threatened to pull me back into the darkness. Instead, I found Allie's card and made the call. Allie's office occupied the second floor of a converted Victorian house in a quiet professional district. The waiting room featured framed gold records and vintage concert posters, alongside law degrees and bar admissions. It felt like a place that understood both the legal and creative worlds. The first thing we need to do, Allie explained once we were seated in her office, is document everything. And I mean everything. Over the next 3 hours, we created a comprehensive timeline. The destruction itself, my injuries, the lost clients, the foreclosure, the ongoing harassment through follow-up videos, the financial impact, the reputational damage. This isn't just one legal case, Allie explained, reviewing our notes. It's multiple causes of action: breaking and entering, assault and battery, destruction of property, intentional interference with business relationships, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, invasion of privacy, and misappropriation of your image for commercial gain. She leaned forward. Teresa, the damages here are substantial. We're talking lost income, property damage, medical expenses, emotional distress, potential punitive damages, and the ongoing profits they're making from your suffering. But their family, I said, the programmed response still automatic despite everything. Family who planned and executed the destruction of your livelihood, physically assaulted you, filmed it without consent, edited it deceptively, monetized your trauma, and continue to profit from your suffering, Allie countered. Biology doesn't excuse criminality. She was right. The mental fog that had enveloped me for weeks began to lift, replaced by a growing clarity. This wasn't just about me. It was about standing up to calculated cruelty masked as entertainment. What do we do first? I asked. We gather evidence, build the strongest possible case, and prepare for the fact that once we file, they'll likely try to destroy evidence. The next week was a flurry of activity. I provided Allie with all the text messages, emails, and social media posts related to the incident. We documented the property damage with detailed inventories and replacement costs. Medical records confirmed my injuries. Financial statements demonstrated the immediate and projected long-term losses. Most critically, Allie discovered that my home security system, which I had installed primarily to protect expensive equipment, had been recording during the break-in. I had forgotten about the cloud backup in the chaos of the aftermath. The unedited footage showed the entire incident, including Jake's punch and Brooke's deliberate filming of my injuries. It directly contradicted their edited version that had gone viral. While the legal groundwork progressed, I received an unexpected call from Sam, my former assistant engineer. I know this is awkward after everything, he began, but I'm working at Lakeside Studios now, and we had a client cancel last minute. They've already paid for the block. My boss said you could use the space if you want. No charge. Just, if you need to work. The gesture nearly brought me to tears. I don't know what to say, Sam. Say yes? Look, what happened to you was messed up. A lot of us in the industry think so, even if people aren't speaking up publicly. I accepted his offer and spent 3 days in the studio, finishing a small project that had been contracted before the destruction. The simple act of adjusting levels, positioning microphones, and shaping sound reconnected me to my identity as an engineer rather than a victim. I sent the completed tracks to the client with no expectation. Their response came the next day. This is exactly what we wanted. Better, actually. When can we book you again? It wasn't much a local band with a modest budget, but it was work. It was proof I could still create despite everything I'd lost. Meanwhile, Allie had been quietly investigating Jake and Brooke's digital footprint. She discovered they had established a business entity, Hartman Viral LLC, specifically to manage revenue from the destruction videos. They had applied for trademarks on phrases from the incident and were selling merchandise featuring stylized sledgehammers. Most disturbingly, Allie found plans for a sequel video in files cached on Jake's public cloud storage. They were planning to target the lakeside studios where I had been working, with detailed notes on how to make the destruction even more epic than last time. They're not just opportunists, Allie concluded. They're building a business model around destroying your career. This strengthens our case for an injunction and restraining order alongside the main lawsuit. Through Sam's industry connections, I learned that while Jake's record deal was generating publicity, music critics who had heard advanced tracks were unimpressed. Derivative and technically mediocre was the consensus, but the label was pushing forward on the strength of his newfound notoriety. Brooke, meanwhile, had monetized her expanded platform with sponsored posts for brands seemingly unconcerned with how she had gained her following. Each new promotion felt like another endorsement of the destruction of my life. Allie suggested I contact other victims of Jake and Brooke's pranks. It hadn't occurred to me that there might be others, but a social media search quickly revealed earlier, less viral videos. A college roommate whose art portfolio was ruined. A former bandmate whose drum kit was accidentally pushed down a flight of stairs. A neighbor whose garden was destroyed for epic yard transformation gone wrong. I reached out to each one. Most responded with their own stories of calculated cruelty disguised as content creation. None had pursued legal action, either because they couldn't afford it or because they feared the social media backlash. All agreed to provide statements for our case. As we prepared to file the lawsuit, I created secure backups of all evidence. The security footage, text messages, emails, financial records, medical reports, everything was stored both physically and in encrypted cloud storage that only Allie and I could access. The night before filing, I received another blow. An anonymous email contained screenshots from a private chat between my parents, Jake and Brooke. Dad, make sure you really capture her reaction when she sees the studio. That's what will get the views. Mom, the mixer should be first, that's the most expensive piece, right? Brooke, already planning to start there. We'll make it dramatic. Dad, just be careful. Property damage is one thing, but don't actually hurt her. Jake, no promises if she tries to stop us. This is going to be epic. My parents hadn't just known, they had actively participated in planning the destruction. The family I had grown up with, shared holidays with, supported through countless crises, had conspired to destroy everything I had built. The betrayal was complete. I forwarded the screenshots to Allie with a simple message. Add my parents to the lawsuit. The morning we filed the lawsuit, Allie had prepared me for what would come next. Once they're served, expect retaliation through social media. They'll try to control the narrative, paint you as the villain, and potentially destroy evidence. We've taken precautions, but brace yourself for the backlash. What I wasn't prepared for was the speed of their response. Within hours of being served, Jake went live on Instagram, tearing up the legal papers on camera. My own sister is suing me, and our parents. After all we've done for her. She's just jealous that I'm finally successful while her career is tanking. Brooke quickly followed with a tearful video claiming I had abused them growing up, inventing wild stories about my supposedly violent tendencies. She broke Jake's arm when he was 10 because he used her guitar without permission, she claimed, despite the fact that Jake had never had a broken bone in his life. My parents issued a joint statement, expressing heartbreak over Teresa's attempt to profit from family disputes, and claiming they had always supported all our children equally. The initial wave of public response favored them. Comment sections filled with attacks on me, calling me greedy, jealous, and unstable. Industry acquaintances who had been on the fence now publicly distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with what was being framed as a money grab. Allie remained unfazed. This is exactly what we expected. They're panicking because they know what we have. Let them dig their hole deeper. Everything they're saying now is additional defamation we can add to the case. She had already arranged for an interview with Jordan Reyes, a respected music journalist known for thoughtful, fact-based reporting. Unlike the sensationalist coverage elsewhere, Jordan wanted to tell the complete story. I don't have an angle, he assured me when we met. I just want to understand what actually happened and present it accurately. For 4 hours, I walked him through the entire ordeal, providing evidence at each step. The unedited security footage, the text messages showing premeditation, the medical reports documenting my injuries, the financial statements showing my losses, the pattern of behavior established through other victims' testimonies, Jordan's article, The Dark Side of Viral Fame, the destruction of Teresa Hartman's career, was published in Billboard 3 days later. Meticulously researched and scrupulously fair, it presented the facts without sensationalism. It included statements from industry professionals who had worked with me, confirming my reputation for professionalism and integrity. Most powerfully, it featured the unedited security footage stills showing Jake punching me and Brooke filming my injuries. The public narrative began to shift. Comments on Jake and Brooke's social media turned questioning, then critical. Brands that had partnered with Brooke issued statements reevaluating their relationship with her. Music blogs that had hyped Jake's upcoming album started asking uncomfortable questions about the circumstances of his rise to fame. Atlantic Records released a terse statement that they were reviewing the situation. 3 days later, Jake received formal notice that they were invoking the morality clause in his contract. His record deal was terminated. Brooke's social media accounts were suspended across multiple platforms for glorification of violence and property destruction. Her appeals were denied. The legal proceedings continued, despite their attempts to delay. Jake and Brooke failed to appear for scheduled depositions. My parents attempted to distance themselves from the planning, claiming they thought it was just talk and never expected action. Their own text messages betrayed them. Through discovery, we obtained additional damning evidence. A comprehensive marketing plan created by Brooke outlining how to monetize the destruction video, including projected revenue streams and follower growth. Audio recordings of Jake bragging to friends about how destroying Teresa's studio will make us more famous than she ever was. Emails between my parents discussing how to frame the incident to minimize their liability while maximizing Jake's exposure. As the case gained attention, unexpected support emerged from the music community. Engineers and producers I had worked with over the years offered testimonials about my work ethic and integrity. A major equipment manufacturer, seeing the destroyed vintage gear in the security footage, offered to provide replacement pieces at cost. 3 studios in neighboring states reached out with session offers. Most surprisingly, several of Jake's former bandmates contacted me privately, sharing their own stories of his manipulative behavior and sudden betrayal once he thought he didn't need them anymore. 2 agreed to provide depositions about his long-standing resentment toward my career and his explicit statements about wanting to take Teresa down. 6 months into the legal battle, as the evidence mounted overwhelmingly against them, Jake and Brooke attempted an about-face. Suddenly, they wanted to settle. Their lawyer contacted Allie with a lowball offer and vague threats about family dirty laundry they could expose if we continued. Allie's response was succinct. We welcome the opportunity to address any additional issues under oath. They increased their offer. We declined. My parents tried a different approach, calling me directly, despite the ongoing litigation. Please, Teresa, my mother pleaded. This is destroying our family. Can't we work this out between us? You helped destroy my career, I reminded her. You actively participated in planning it. We never thought it would go so far, my father insisted. We love you. If you love me, you'll take responsibility for what you did, I replied, ending the call. The judge denied their motion to dismiss, citing the overwhelming evidence of premeditated, malicious action, resulting in substantial damages. A trial date was set, but Allie predicted they would settle before facing a jury. She was right. 2 weeks before the trial, they proposed a settlement that included full financial compensation, public apologies, and permanent injunctions against creating any content related to me. It's a solid offer, Allie acknowledged. But it's your decision whether to accept it or proceed to trial. I considered the options. A trial would be public, painful, and prolonged, but might result in a larger judgment. A settlement would end the legal battle immediately and provide guaranteed compensation. Let's counter, I decided. I want the full financial settlement, but I also want them to admit what they did in the apology. No vague mistakes were made language. And I want the injunction to include any future monetization of content even tangentially related to me or this incident. Allie smiled. That's exactly what I was thinking. After 3 days of negotiation, they accepted our terms. The settlement totaled $2,800,000, covering all property damage, lost income, medical expenses, emotional distress, and punitive damages. The injunction barred them from creating, appearing in, or profiting from any content related to me, my career, or the incident. And they would issue public apologies, acknowledging the deliberate, premeditated nature of their actions. Jake's statement came first, posted across all his remaining social media accounts. I deliberately planned and executed the destruction of my sister Teresa Hartman's music studio, causing extensive property damage and physical harm. My actions were calculated, malicious, and designed solely to advance my own career at her expense. I deeply regret the pain and damage I have caused, and acknowledge that no apology can fully repair the harm done. Brooks followed, similarly direct and unambiguous. My parents' joint statement admitted their role in financing and planning the destruction, acknowledging they had prioritized Jake and Brooks' ambitions over my well-being and career. As the news of the settlement spread, I received an unexpected email from Mariah Carter herself. I heard what really happened. I'm so sorry for what you went through. When you're ready to work again, I'd like to talk about that acoustic project. Your work on the Anderson Sisters album was exactly the sound I'm looking for. No pressure, just an open door when you're ready. It was the first time in nearly a year that I felt my future might hold something beyond survival. The settlement money arrived on a Tuesday, a substantial sum appearing in my account with the sterile description Hartman v. Hartman et al. Settlement payment. Looking at the number on my phone screen, I felt oddly detached. No amount of money could truly restore what had been taken. My sense of safety, my trust in family, a year of my career, and the irreplaceable vintage equipment that had been destroyed. But it could build something new. With Allie's guidance, I established a structured financial plan. A portion of the settlement went to outstanding medical bills and debts accumulated during my period of unemployment. Another portion was securely invested for long-term stability. The largest share, however, was dedicated to building a new studio, not in a vulnerable home basement, but in a commercial space with proper security systems. I found a suitable building in an emerging arts district, a former printing press with high ceilings, solid concrete floors, and natural light through clerestory windows. The space had good bones but needed significant renovation to transform into a professional recording environment. Working with an acoustic designer who specialized in recording studios, we created a floor plan that incorporated lessons from the original studio while improving on its limitations. 3 isolated recording rooms would allow simultaneous sessions. A spacious control room featured a custom console built to my specifications. The security system included multiple redundancies, cloud backups, and direct connection to the local police station. As construction progressed, I began rebuilding professional relationships. Some bridges had been irreparably burned during the aftermath of the destruction, but others proved more resilient than I had feared. Former clients cautiously reached out, curious about my new venture. Industry colleagues who had maintained respectful distance during the legal proceedings now expressed support for my comeback. 6 months into reconstruction, I received a call from Sam, my former assistant who had offered studio time during my darkest period. "I'm looking for a change," he said without preamble. "Lakeside is great, but I've learned everything I can there. Word is you're building something special. Any chance you need an engineer?" I hired him on the spot. His loyalty during the aftermath had proven his character, and his technical skills had always been excellent. He became the first employee of Resound Studios, my new professional identity. As the studio neared completion, I made a decision that surprised even Allie. I established the Resound Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing resources, education, and legal support to artists and creators affected by property crimes, particularly those targeted because of their creative work. "Are you sure you want to allocate this much of the settlement?" Allie asked as we finalized the foundation paperwork. "The money helps me rebuild my career," I explained. "The foundation helps me rebuild my purpose." The foundation's first initiative provided recording time and equipment grants to 5 musicians who had lost instruments or workspace to theft, fire, or deliberate damage. Their gratitude was overwhelming. But more valuable was the sense that something constructive had emerged from my own experience. My parents attempted reconciliation multiple times as the dust settled. First with tentative text messages, then cards on holidays, finally a letter expressing what seemed like genuine remorse. I responded with polite but firm boundaries, explaining that while I no longer actively harbored anger, I needed substantial time and evidence of changed behavior before considering any relationship. Jake and Brooke remained conspicuously silent after the settlement. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Jake had moved to Austin, working as a sound technician at a small venue. Ironically, the kind of entry-level position I had offered to help him with years earlier. Brooke had returned to college, pursuing a business degree and keeping a deliberately low profile online. Resound Studios officially opened 1 year after the settlement. The launch event featured demonstrations of the new facilities, presentations from the foundation's first grant recipients, and a keynote address from a renowned producer who had been my mentor early in my career. As I stood addressing the gathered industry professionals, local musicians, and supportive friends, I felt a sense of closure that no legal victory could have provided. What was taken from me can never be replaced, I told the attentive crowd. The vintage equipment, the irreplaceable signed instruments, the years of carefully cultivated acoustic treatments, those specific things are gone forever. But what emerged from that destruction is something I never could have envisioned. A stronger, more secure creative space. A foundation dedicated to helping other artists rebuild, and a profound understanding of my own resilience. The first official session at Resound Studios was, fittingly, with Mariah Carter. Her acoustic project had evolved during the intervening months, but her desire to work with me had remained consistent. The session stretched over 3 weeks, yielding what critics would later call her most authentic and emotionally resonant work to date. On the final day of recording, as we listened to playback of the last track, Mariah turned to me. "You know what I love about working with you? You understand that sometimes the best sound comes after something's been broken." 1 year after the studio opening, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a battered guitar pick and a short note in my father's handwriting. "Found this in the attic. From your first concert in 6th grade. We were proud then. We're proud now. When you're ready, we're here." I placed the pick in a small frame in my office, not as a signal of forgiveness but as a reminder of the journey. Healing would take time, boundaries, and evidence of changed behavior, all things I had learned to value through the rebuilding process. At the Producer of the Year ceremony that fall, accepting the award for my work on Mariah's album and 2 other successful projects, I acknowledged those who had stood by me during the darkest period. True support isn't always comfortable or convenient, I told the audience. Sometimes it's the person who offers studio time when you've lost everything. Sometimes it's a stranger in an emergency room who sees your value when you've forgotten it. Sometimes it's the client who trusts your talent enough to wait for your rebuilding. To everyone who demonstrated that kind of support, thank you for showing me what real family looks like. The journey from destruction to resolution had taught me that family isn't always defined by blood, that justice doesn't always heal the deepest wounds, and that rebuilding isn't just about replacing what was lost, but creating something stronger in its place. Most importantly, I learned that our worth isn't determined by those who try to destroy us, but by our capacity to rise from the destruction and create something new. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? What would you have done in my situation? Fought back legally like I did, or tried to forgive and move forward? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found my story meaningful, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and rebuilding after betrayal. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message of hope after devastation, please share it with them. Thank you for listening to my journey. May you find strength in your own struggles and emerge even stronger.